A long career is never tested by ambition alone, it is tested by endurance of identity. The higher you rise, the more the world tries to define you, simplify you, and ultimately confine you. Success brings visibility, but visibility brings pressure. And pressure forces a choice: expand to meet expectations, or protect the core of who you are. Sophia Loren's career was not just a story of fame. It was a sustained negotiation between global stardom and personal authorship. As Hollywood amplified her image, she faced a strategic tension familiar to anyone who has spent decades in the workforce. How do you grow without becoming a product of other people's projections? This is not gossip. It is a study in identity under pressure and what it takes to preserve autonomy over time. Let's examine how she did it. The first true turning point in Sophia Loren's career did not occur when audiences noticed her beauty. It occurred when the industry began to test whether she was replaceable. In the post-war film landscape, both Italian cinema and Hollywood were recalibrating. Italy was moving from near-realism into more commercially exportable productions. Hollywood, meanwhile, was confronting the decline of the studio system and the rise of international co-productions. Actresses were frequently positioned as interchangeable assets, marketed aggressively, circulated quickly, and replaced without ceremony. Visibility was abundant. Longevity was rare. Loren entered this environment with immediate demand. Studios recognized her camera presence and global appeal. Contracts followed. Production schedules intensified. For several consecutive years, she appeared in film after film, building what looked like unstoppable momentum. From the outside, it resembled ascent. Inside the machinery of the industry, however, saturation carried risk. High output created exposure, but it also encouraged typecasting. The market began to frame her primarily as a Mediterranean symbol, sensual, vibrant, decorative. That framing represented the first serious strategic crossroads. At this stage, many performers accept the velocity of fame as proof of security. The logic is seductive: say yes, stay visible, dominate the moment. Loren instead began to sense a structural trap. If she remained only a glamorous export, she would enjoy short-term dominance but limited artistic authority. The breakthrough she needed was not more screen time, it was credibility that could outlast fashion. Her adjustment was deliberate. She slowed the pace. She became more selective. Rather than multiplying appearances, she prioritized roles that demanded emotional weight and psychological range. This was not an obvious move. In a competitive international market, stepping back from constant exposure risked losing momentum. But Loren appeared to understand something that many careers learn too late: durability depends on depth, not frequency. In choosing more demanding roles, she repositioned herself from image to actress. The distinction matters. An image is owned by the market. An actress owns craft. By anchoring her identity in performance quality rather than publicity cycles, she began to shift the power dynamic. Studios might finance projects, but artistic legitimacy would define her standing. This pivot unfolded within a broader industry transition. European actors were increasingly crossing into American productions, but many were pressured to dilute their cultural specificity. Loren did not erase her origins to assimilate seamlessly. Instead, she retained her accent, her presence, her distinctiveness, transforming what could have been a limitation into brand differentiation. At a time when global markets were expanding, authenticity became leverage. For professionals who have spent decades in their own fields, this moment is recognizable. The first wave of success often comes from doing what the system rewards. The second phase demands redefining the terms before the system defines them for you. Loren's early turning point was not dramatic on the surface. It was strategic, internal, and disciplined. By prioritizing substance over speed, she converted momentum into foundation. And that shift would determine whether her career peaked quickly or matured steadily. In long careers, the earliest strategic recalibration often decides everything that follows. In the next section, we'll examine how the pressure intensified and how she responded when visibility began to test stability. That strategic recalibration did not reduce pressure. It refined it. Once Sophia Loren established credibility beyond surface glamour, expectations multiplied rather than softened. Success changed the nature of scrutiny. She was no longer being evaluated simply as a rising international presence, she was being measured as a standard. And standards are rarely granted room for fluctuation. The industry context intensified this dynamic. As global distribution expanded, stars became transnational commodities. Their box office draw was quantified. Their salaries became headlines. Their pairing with leading men was debated as financial strategy. In this environment, consistency was demanded at a near-mechanical level. Audiences expected charisma. Studios expected returns. Critics expected growth. Each constituency applied pressure from a different direction. For Loren, this meant that every role carried symbolic weight. A commercial success reinforced her status, a misstep risked redefining her trajectory. The margin for experimentation narrowed. The more she proved herself capable of depth, the more she was expected to deliver it on demand. Public visibility added another layer. As her earnings reached record-breaking levels for a female performer, the narrative shifted from talent to valuation. Compensation became commentary. The conversation subtly reframed her from artist to asset. And when individuals become assets, performance is no longer personal, it becomes contractual expectation. This is where identity tension sharpens. Craft requires vulnerability, patience, and internal space. Market expectation requires output, predictability, and availability. Balancing the two demands discipline that often goes unseen. Reports from that period indicate episodes of physical and emotional strain, symptoms not uncommon among high-performing professionals whose external success accelerates faster than their internal recalibration. What matters strategically is not the existence of pressure, but the response to it. Rather than escalating productivity to silence doubt, Loren adjusted again. She did not attempt to outwork the pressure. She restructured around it. Fewer projects. More intentional collaborations. Greater control over script selection. This move signaled an understanding that pace is a form of power. By regulating her availability, she increased her leverage. In many long careers, the instinct after major success is expansion, more appearances, broader exposure, diversified ventures. Loren's approach was measured containment. She concentrated influence instead of dispersing it. The result was not retreat, but stabilization. There is a lesson here for professionals who have navigated decades of responsibility. After a breakthrough, expectations rarely return to baseline. Performance becomes precedent. And precedent can quietly become prison if not renegotiated. The challenge is recognizing when growth must shift from external scaling to internal sustainability. Loren's management of public pressure suggests an awareness that longevity depends less on constant escalation and more on calibrated presence. Her visibility did not disappear. It matured. The distinction is subtle but crucial. She allowed the narrative to evolve from spectacle to substance, from novelty to reliability. In doing so, she protected the core identity that had made the earlier turning point possible. Pressure, in this phase, did not vanish. It became structural. And her response was structural as well. If you've ever experienced the weight of heightened expectations after years of effort, you understand this terrain. In the next section, we'll look at how she transformed that stability into long-term strategic autonomy, and what that means for durable legacy. Pressure, once stabilized, presents a different question: how do you convert resilience into authority? For Sophia Loren, the next phase of her career was not about surviving expectations but restructuring her position within them. Having proven artistic credibility and managed the weight of public scrutiny, she faced a subtler challenge: ownership. Not legal ownership alone, but narrative ownership. Who determines the direction of a mature career, the marketplace, or the individual inside it? By the midpoint of her international prominence, Loren had accumulated leverage. Box office consistency and critical respect provided what many performers never obtain: negotiating power. The strategic shift that followed was less visible than her early recalibrations, yet more decisive. She began aligning herself not merely with roles, but with frameworks that preserved autonomy. First, she reinforced cross-market positioning. Rather than anchoring exclusively in Hollywood, she sustained active ties to European productions. This dual presence functioned as structural diversification. If one industry's taste shifted, another remained accessible. In corporate terms, she avoided single market dependency. In artistic terms, she maintained range. Second, she became increasingly selective about collaborators. Long-term professional alignment replaced opportunistic partnerships. Stability in production relationships created a buffer against volatile studio politics. Consistent alliances reduced unpredictability. In industries built on momentum and reinvention, continuity can be a form of quiet control. Third, she refined her public visibility. Rather than saturating media cycles, she allowed intervals. This was a strategic recalibration of scarcity. When appearances become constant, they lose impact. When they are measured, they signal intentionality. Loren's later career demonstrates an understanding that controlled presence enhances perceived authority. Crucially, she resisted the pressure to reinvent purely for novelty's sake. Many performers extend careers by radical transformation, altering image, courting controversy, or chasing trends. Loren's repositioning was evolutionary, not reactive. She matured publicly without abandoning foundational identity. This continuity reinforced trust. Audiences did not experience rupture, they experienced progression. Autonomy in long careers is rarely dramatic. It is exercised through contract clauses, script approvals, pacing decisions, and geographic choices. It appears incremental. Yet over time, these increments accumulate into structural independence. Loren's trajectory suggests that she understood this compounding effect. There is also the matter of brand integrity. As the entertainment industry globalized further, celebrity identities became increasingly commodified. Licensing opportunities, endorsements, and cross-industry ventures proliferated. Loren participated selectively, attaching her name to ventures that reinforced rather than diluted her image. The alignment between personal identity and professional extension remained consistent. For professionals beyond entertainment, this phase mirrors a critical transition. Early career stages emphasize access. Mid-career stages emphasize credibility. Later stages demand stewardship. Stewardship means protecting what has been built, not through defensiveness, but through deliberate positioning. Loren's long-term strategy reflects this stewardship mindset. She did not aim to dominate every season. She aimed to remain structurally relevant across decades. That requires a willingness to step outside immediate cycles and think in horizons rather than quarters. Perhaps the most understated element of her repositioning was emotional steadiness. Autonomy is not only contractual, it is psychological. The ability to decline projects, to delay appearances, to withstand quieter years without panic, these are internal competencies. They signal confidence in cumulative value. By consolidating cross-market presence, stabilizing professional alliances, moderating visibility, and preserving identity continuity, Loren shifted from participant in the system to negotiator within it. She was no longer responding to opportunity. She was shaping it. In long careers, control rarely arrives suddenly. It is constructed decision by decision. Loren's repositioning illustrates how autonomy, once earned, must be maintained through strategic restraint and long-range vision. Autonomy, once established structurally, must eventually be tested personally. Because no long career unfolds in a vacuum. Decisions about time, visibility, geography, and priorities inevitably shape professional longevity as much as contracts or critical acclaim. For Sophia Loren, the most consequential choices in her later trajectory were not headline-grabbing reinventions, but recalibrations of pace and presence. As the industry shifted through new waves of talent, evolving aesthetics, and generational turnover, she confronted a reality every enduring professional eventually faces: aging in public view. In cinema, aging is rarely neutral. Particularly for women, the industry has historically compressed perceived relevance into narrow age brackets. The challenge is not simply remaining employed, it is remaining valued without contorting identity to fit younger archetypes. Loren did not attempt to compete with emerging actresses on novelty or reinvention. Instead, she allowed maturation to become part of her professional narrative. This required discipline. Visibility in earlier decades had been expansive and international. Later phases became more selective. She did not disappear, but she reduced frequency. This strategic contraction protected dignity and prevented overexposure. In markets driven by youth cycles, scarcity can elevate stature. By appearing less often, she preserved symbolic weight. Equally important was role selection. As opportunities evolved, Loren gravitated toward parts that reflected experience rather than resisted it. This alignment between life stage and screen presence strengthened credibility. Audiences were invited to see continuity rather than denial. Sustaining relevance, in this model, does not mean imitating earlier peaks, it means integrating accumulated depth. There is also the dimension of geographic balance. Maintaining connection to European cinema while remaining recognizable to American audiences allowed Loren to operate within multiple cultural contexts. This diversification insulated her from being defined solely by one industry's generational turnover. Relevance became transnational rather than trend-dependent. Another personal dimension influencing longevity was the calibration of public exposure beyond film. Interviews, public appearances, and selective brand extensions reinforced a consistent image, poised, self-possessed, grounded. In an era when media increasingly rewarded spectacle, restraint distinguished her. She did not chase cultural conversation, she allowed it to circle back to her when substantive work justified it. For professionals observing from outside entertainment, the parallel is clear. Aging in public view, whether in corporate leadership, academia, law, or creative industries, requires an internal shift from acceleration to stewardship. Early career stages reward speed and adaptability. Later stages reward judgment and composure. Loren's choices reflect a prioritization of composure. Sustaining relevance over decades also depends on accepting cyclical prominence. Not every year will carry equal visibility. The capacity to tolerate quieter periods without reactive overcorrection signals confidence in cumulative legacy. Loren's career suggests comfort with rhythm. Visibility rose and receded, but the underlying identity remained stable. Importantly, these decisions avoided speculation or sensationalism. There were no abrupt pivots designed to generate controversy. Instead, relevance was sustained through continuity of values, professionalism, cultural rootedness, and controlled exposure. In industries prone to volatility, steadiness itself becomes distinctive. Long careers are not extended by resisting time. They are extended by negotiating with it. Loren's later stage positioning demonstrates that relevance does not demand perpetual reinvention. It demands alignment between experience and expression, between public presence and personal equilibrium. In this phase, identity is no longer under immediate pressure from rapid ascent. It is tested by duration. And duration, when handled with restraint and clarity, transforms longevity into quiet authority. Longevity does not reward intensity alone. It rewards management. Sophia Loren's career illustrates that managing success is not about expanding endlessly, it is about regulating momentum before momentum regulates you. Early visibility gave her leverage, but it was discipline that converted leverage into stability. She understood that success, if left unmanaged, can harden into expectation, and expectation can quietly erode identity. By adjusting pace, selecting roles deliberately, and resisting overexposure, she transformed success from a surge into a structure. Protecting autonomy required equal clarity. Autonomy is rarely declared, it is negotiated. It lives in the projects declined as much as the projects accepted. It shows in geographic flexibility, in controlled public presence, in the refusal to dilute core identity for short-term gain. Loren's career suggests that autonomy is not rebellion against an industry, it is strategic coexistence within it. She did not attempt to dismantle the system. She learned how to operate inside it without surrendering authorship. Sustaining relevance, finally, demanded maturity. Rather than chasing perpetual reinvention, she aligned her public image with lived experience. She allowed aging to inform her work instead of competing against it. Relevance, in this model, is not about remaining at the center of every cultural moment. It is about remaining credible across changing ones. That distinction is subtle, but it is decisive. From an analytical standpoint, what stands out most is not glamour or awards, but pacing. The most durable careers often belong to those who understand rhythm, when to accelerate, when to consolidate, when to step back. Loren's trajectory reflects a professional who treated time as a strategic partner rather than an adversary. In industries that reward urgency, she practiced calibration. For anyone who has spent decades building a reputation, this arc feels familiar. Early growth requires courage. Mid-career endurance requires resilience. Late-stage relevance requires restraint. Managing success, protecting autonomy, and sustaining relevance are not separate tasks. They are phases of the same long negotiation between ambition and identity. If this analysis resonates with your own experience of navigating pressure over time, continue with the next profile. There is always more to learn from careers that endure.